Okay, we have to talk about everything that happened in Avatar: The Last Airbender, Episode 5, Spirited Away. This episode, I feel, is very different than the previous 4 episodes, but like not in a good way. Also, I want to start by saying that in the animated version, I also didn't really like this episode because I just feel like it was definitely a filler episode. Like there's a couple key points that were important, but overall I feel like it was very like filler-esque. So this episode starts off with Aang and the group in a forest that was once presumably very beautiful, very lush, very full. Right now it's very barren. They meet a child that leads them to a village and everyone's like, whoa, 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 back off. You know, everyone's scared of like Aang and the group because they're always like the newcomers. And I understand that people are reserved, especially in a time where the Fire Nation is, you know, wreaking havoc. Everyone's very defensive. Everyone's scared. They're cautious and that's to be expected. But long story short, Aang starts walking around. He's vibing, like he's feeling himself. He's feeling the area. He's really in tune with his like spirituality all of a sudden. And I'm like, where are you getting this from? Like, where are you getting this from? I understand that, like, the air nomads themselves are very, like, spiritual people, and I get that, but, like, he's, like, really tapping into his spiritual powers, his, like, spiritual avatar powers. I'm like, you don't really have any avatar training yet. Like, none. Like, he's really in tune with it, and he's referencing the area and, like, talking about the bear spirits of the village and things like that. And I'm like, how do you know about that? You've never been there before. And I'm sure you didn't learn about that because you ran off in the cover of darkness on Appa when you found out that you were the new avatar, and then you fell into the sea and you went to an iceberg and like, here we are. You know what I mean? So it's like, you didn't know about this area. You didn't know about the bear spirit. You just got to the area. So nobody told you about it yet. So like, how did you know about it? You know what I mean? So somehow he's like super in tune with this area specifically and their spirits and this bear spirit and all these things magically. And I'm just like, okay. Then we flash over to General Iroh and Prince Zuko, who's still not real mean yet. And I'm like, your whole personality is supposed to be like a hothead. And right now you're like mild picante salsa. But enter June and Nyla. June is that assassin tracker lady. She's amazing. She's one of my favorite characters actually from the original series. And Nyla is her little tracker beast that does that little tongue lashing licking thing that she does to like paralyze people. So Nyla, she like gets a scent from a person's belongings and she can basically track them anywhere in the world. Of course, she has a little quick interaction with Prince Zuko and she hits on who she calls his dad, which is General Iroh. Obviously, that's not Prince Zuko's dad, but she doesn't know that at the time. And Prince Zuko's like, don't like her. And she's like, as if. Then we flash back to Aang, and he's like, okay, everybody, I need to get into the spirit world. Like, I know this is what I need to do. We just need to get there. We need to get some answers. So he's like, okay, y'all stand here. I'm going to sit on a rock. Let me go talk to everybody. So he sits there on the rock. Katara and Sokka are like, okay, we'll keep watch. You got the first watch. You got the second watch. Okay, let's do this. So he sits there. Sokka and Katara are waiting for their DoorDash. Aang's like, yeah, counting sheep. And then all of a sudden, he goes into the spirit world. But with a twist. Because Katara and Sokka are now going in the spirit world too. And they're like, I didn't sign up for this. And Aang's like, I guess I'm just so freaking powerful. Like, you all are with me. So now they're walking down the road. And Aang sees an owl spirit. Has a little 1-2 chat with him. And, you know, what he learns from the owl spirit isn't exactly what he relays to Katara and Sokka. But that's fine. He's the Avatar. You can do whatever he wants. Also, side note, the owl spirit looked so real. Like, the CGI or whatever with this show is, like, spot on. It's so good. I mean, it's Netflix. Y'all have unlimited money, so I expect it at this point. Now, me seeing the original series 814 and a half times, I'm like, High Bay's got to be coming soon. And that's the bear spirit, but with a twist, because the bear spirit, not in its true form, like the angry bear spirit, is the one that's, like, black and white, and it's like... you know, before it gets all tame and like pacified. Yeah. So I'm like, you got to be coming around the corner like when she comes, like any moment now. But we'll get back to that. Then we skip over to Azula. She's having a little training session. She's all like 1-2 punch, 1-2 uppercut, elbow, 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 you know, and then her friends Ty Lee and Mai are like, you know, maybe stop. And she's like, nah. And they're like, stop. She's like, no. And they're like, stop. And she's like, no. And then you actually see a quick little brief moment of her blue fire bending. And that's when you're like, oh, because when the blue fire starts coming out, that's when you get that first glimpse of like, okay, she's starting to get a little unhinged, a little erratic. That's when you start seeing that little glimpse in her eye and you're like, oh, she's unraveling. I like that. Then again, the thought of Prince Zuko being very, very mild crosses my mind, and I'm like, bro, you are supposed to be mean. You were literally banished. You were exiled from the Fire Nation for being a brat that spoke out of turn. You were literally burned by your papa, the Fire Lord. You were literally marked, banished, burned, kicked out. Bye-bye. You're supposed to be mean. And you're just like, no, uncle, I don't want any jasmine tea. I want chamomile. I'm just like, come on. Anyway, we're back in the spirit world again. And like I said, Haibe, the dark spirit version, pops out of the corner and he's all like, la 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 la. And Aang's like, okay, y'all, I told you, stay on the path, stay on the road, we'll be fine. And he's all like, la 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 la. No, you're not. And Aang's like, I told you, just stay on the road, we'll be fine. They're fine. But that thing be screaming and flailing his head and shit. So both Katara and Sokka have these little like flashbacks to the past, which is nice because if you're a first time viewer of this show, you kind of get to see a glimpse into their past and what happened to like some of their family moments. So, you know, with Katara, you see how her mom dies, which is obviously spoiler alert. If you haven't seen the show, don't watch this part. But if you have, you already know what happens. You know, Fire Nation comes into the village. They're like, where's the last waterbender? And they're like, we don't know. But Katara's like hiding under a table. And the mom is like, I'm the last waterbender. And then the Fire Nation, you know, soldier like kills the mom, you know, but it's depicted very, very well. It really mimics the animated version like 100% right there. Loved that. Sokka, same thing. You can kind of see how things happen back with his dad and he gets initiated and he's like, has his little, you know, warrior training, a good moment. Also wanted to note that the pacing of this episode is so fast and they're, again, really accelerating the timeline of events. And like, I keep saying that it's super fast and it really is, but they're cutting out a lot of filler and like, I think that's good, but they're definitely cutting out certain moments where I'm like, I feel like you should have kept it in. But overall, I'm like, okay. Like one of my points, for example, is like when Aang is in the spirit world and he's having these little flashback, little flash forward, I don't know, these little moments in the spirit world. You know, he flashes over to Ko, which is that faceless demon. There's no reason that he's having that moment because he doesn't experience that in the animated version until the siege of the Northern Water Tribe. So that's way later, like part 2 of the siege of the Northern Water Tribe. So like, you're way ahead of that game. You're not supposed to experience that face-stealing demon until way later. So it's like, why are you showing that now? You know what I mean? So it's like, why spoil that moment? And if you're going to show that now, are you going to show that later? And if so, why show it now? You know what I mean? So it's like, that was unnecessary. And they're doing that a lot where they're kind of combining events. And a lot of the time so far, it's pointless. So I'm like, I guess we'll see later when the Northern Water Tribe war happens, if they do tap into that face-stealing, you know, demon moment, spirit thing. Or not. My final thoughts on this episode specifically is that it was kind of messy. It was very, very fast paced. And I feel like this episode was progressed a lot faster than the previous episodes. And I feel like this was my least favorite episode of the 5 that I've watched so far. But that was my recap of episode 5. Let's get ready for my recap of episode 6 coming up ASAP.